Just checking. First meeting back will be 2 weeks from now, so we'll be on the 14th of July. Without further ado, we can move right into the update. Stephanie and Andy for our process update. Take it away.
Thanks, Lee. This is Stephanie McGarrett. I'm the director of the Pandemic Recovery Office. Sorry not to be on camera today as I'm recovering from a slight illness, but I did want to go over with you where we are. With the budget coming out, and if it is to be signed by the governor, then we'll continue to look for some of these steps to change. But I know that in terms of getting some of the agencies to sort out some of the challenges they had with the way the money was originally appropriated, I think some of that is addressed in the budget. So we'll work through some of this. You probably haven't seen numbers change too much, but as we work through some of those challenges with federal and state conflicting guidance, we'll see how we move this along. I think most of you are to the request and receiving funds and have had your Pangram accounts set up for each. And with the compliance and monitoring handbooks that we released last week and the reporting handbook, which Andy has already talked about, and the reporting guidelines, we really want to spend most of the time today answering questions, focused again more on reporting, as we do have quite a few reports due to the legislature as well as to the U.S. Treasury, but we are happy to try to answer as many questions as you have. So we have some of our team here today, as Lee said, many of them are in training, but we'll work through it. And if we don't know the answer, we'll get back to you.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andy McCracken. I do our policy and planning and reporting work here at NC Pro. So as you all have received a bunch of documents and guidance from us in the last week or so, as Stephanie said, we have a number of reports that we have to submit in the next month here. So we really want to focus as much as we can on the reporting pieces today, given some of the urgency there, and making sure that things are as clear and straightforward as possible, given all the many projects that you all are managing using SFRF. So we did release, and you should have received from your grants manager earlier this week, the reporting handbook, which provides some detailed guidance on how we are handling reporting on SFRF here in North Carolina. We also, on the website, which you all can head to ncpro.nc.gov and find the reporting information from there. But we have a template to facilitate subaward reporting. And then we do have, and I'll share in a moment, the schedule of these, another series of office hours that we'll hold over the next 2 weeks to continue to answer questions and troubleshoot with you all as that comes up. And then we've updated and are continuing to update the Pangram user guide to reflect some changes we've had to make to accommodate the recent changes that U.S. Treasury has sort of sent at us. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes here briefly, and then I actually do want to share, really walk you all through the process so the reporting is more tangible in terms of what we're actually talking about and how some of these reporting mechanisms will look. So as a reminder, we are responsible for reporting to the legislature and to U.S. Treasury. You all are responsible for reporting to us. Your sub-recipients report to you. And so that's how the information sort of reaches where it's supposed to go. We have this chart here we've shared a few times. We have project level data and then the subaward data, which we'll focus on a bit here. And the performance measures are coming later. We'll follow up with you on that. A few important notes about this first reporting period. First, want to acknowledge we are working on a relatively tight time frame, and we want to not saying that this is an easy process, but we are trying to make it as easy as it possibly can, while complying with all the information and requirements we have to comply with. So the first report, we are aiming for getting info back from you all in about 2 weeks here. And that would be basically a catch-up report. So normally this would be a monthly report. This first one will need to capture any activities that you all have had on your SFRF projects during this quarter, during second quarter of the year. If you do not have any activities, that is fine. Just communicate with your grants manager so we know what to expect from you all. If you need to really focus your reports for this period on the projects under which you do have activities and expenditures to report, please do so. The other note is that, as I mentioned, with the updated guidance from Treasury, we've had to make some adjustments to how we are collecting information through Pangram because the information itself has had to change. So those changes are being implemented now, software-wise. So at this point, we're given the holiday expecting that all of that will be live and ready for you all to submit toward the end of next week. If there are any changes to that, in either way, once it does go live, we will communicate with you all. Understand that that is again, a relatively tight time window, about a week, where the portal where Pangram will have the information, all the fields ready for you all. But in the interim, please start collecting your information. That's what we'll talk about here. The other thing I want to say, there's an annual performance report that normally we would collect from you all in mid-July. Since this is the first year, we are going to push the deadline back into September. There are a handful of projects under which we do need to provide updated information to U.S. Treasury. We have started reaching out to the projects that are affected, to the agencies that are affected by that. So if you don't hear from us, you can plan on getting more information on performance reporting in short order here as we look ahead toward early fall. So in the meantime, please first organize your subaward data for those of you who have already started sending funds out to other entities. And then you can prepare, that'll help inform the project level data and how we'll need to receive that. Once Pangram is open, you'll be able to submit in there, but always great to double check the numbers before it's actually in there so that everything validates properly. So for today, wanted to use a quick example to sort of walk through how this will look on your end. So the example here is state of North Carolina has appropriated $10 million using SFRF to the North Carolina Department of Examples to build capacity for community-based organizations to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So for the current reporting period, the Department of Examples has obligated $300,000 of that $10 million grant and has spent half of those funds during this period. It breaks down into a few categories. Their personnel costs to actually set up and administer the program. There are the personnel costs related to actually implementing the program and interfacing with the public or different stakeholders. You have set up sub-grants to regional organizations that are going to help carry out the purpose of your grant. And then finally, there are some contractors that the Department of Examples has engaged to help gather and deliver needed materials and PPE and such. So first, back to those steps, I suggest you organize your subaward data, because that is going to be probably the most tedious piece of this moving forward. So I'm actually going to pull up a sample sort of completed version of the actual template that we can look at together. Okay, so this is what the front page of it will look like. I know I've shared this a little bit before, but this will help identify exactly, what bits of information that we've shared show up where. So this is the front page. You'll need to indicate the reporting month. I believe in the past I said this should be the month during which you report. That was incorrect. The reporting month should align with the reporting period about what you were reporting. So your June data being reported in July, would be, we're pretending that we were reporting this on July 15th. So this is the June data. You enter your date of submission. Abraham Lincoln works at Department of Examples, and so on. Again, we have a data dictionary in here with information about each data element in that report. We have a flow chart to help you determine, based on the different bits of information that you need to report, where exactly in this document it shows up. So here, you all remember, there's the $50,000 threshold that requires detailed subaward reporting. So to use this document, you would you would align with the reporting month. So you're reporting in June. You've collected the UEI or TIN for in this case 3 entities that are receiving funds or to which you've committed more than $50,000 or $50,000 or more. You have to provide their name, where they're located. There's the same.gov question to follow up, and thanks Jane for following up on this question since last time. Federal funds here, it does specifically mean federal contracts or federal grants, like grant awards. So if that doesn't apply to situation, follow up. If you're not sure, reach out to us. We can help out with that. So you enter your subrecipients on this tab, and then the actual information about the subawards that you've committed to those entities gets reported on the subawards tab for entities that are going to receive more than $50,000. Again, you need to add the reporting month. On this page again, you'll need to provide the UEI and TIN, and here's where you'll assign a subaward number. Our recommendation for this is to use, in order for the subaward numbers to work with how Treasury will receive the information, they need to be numbers, and we recommend somewhere between 3 and 10 digits for that. If you have other circumstances or different ways to track it, let us know, but we do need to provide a number up to 20 digits. Treasury will accept up to 20. We are recommending less than that, just so that gives us a little wiggle room if we need it as we navigate some of the business rules that the Treasury portal has thrown at us. So we enter the subaward type for each of these. So these first 2 are the subawards to those regional entities. That's a traditional subgrant. This third one is the contract for goods and services. You enter your obligation amount. If your obligation amount is going to be less than $50,000, you do not report that subaward on this page. That would be reported in aggregate. Enter the date on which you enter that subaward. Primary sector of the entity. There's an other category. You can, if the existing options don't match what the circumstances are. You provide the period of performance, address, and of the primary place of performance. And then you want to provide a description of, what's the purpose of the subaward funds? Why are you giving money to another entity? And then finally, what is this specific subaward supposed to accomplish? And then last, for the detailed reporting, so here under subawards, you've entered how much is being obligated to those entities. Here under the expenditures tab is where you'll indicate how much money has actually been paid out to those entities. So here the subaward number identifies what the subaward is, or identifies the expenditures to the subaward. You want to provide the expenditure start date and end date. It's fine if that's the same day. And then finally the expenditure amount. So all of that gets us, this doesn't fully account for everything that Department of Examples has obligated or sent out. The rest of it are going to be aggregated reports. So here you have aggregated grants awarded. So you obligated $65,000 and actually paid out $40,000. and then have other contracts which they've entered. Under this program, there's no payments to individuals, at least not now. And so this is blank, but this is where you would report any payments to individuals in aggregate. Again, any payments to individuals, including sole proprietorships, need to be reported in aggregate, regardless of how much funding is committed to them. So that is the quick rundown of how Department of Examples project would show up on the subaward reporting template. Now for the project data that you actually enter into Pangram, then there will be there's the expense reporting page in Pangram, and sort of a handful of info above this, but these are the important bits here for reporting data. So there's going to be expense types that you report up here, and then programmatic data below. Show you examples of this. So for the reporting expense types, you will you'll provide sort of line item of those different buckets of funds that you are or the different buckets under which your plans sort of break down. So you'll remember said that there is personnel costs related to grant administration that would match up with what will be expense type called grant administration personnel costs. And so you would select under accounting category grant administration personnel costs and enter that you have expended $10,000 there. And then so on and so forth. So these are expense types that'll be in the system that align with how this program has been put together. I do want to note, so any non-personnel spending is what will trigger needing to provide subaward reporting attachment. And that's to align with the way that U.S. Treasury is requiring information throughout this process. So then down on the page, the programmatic data section, you'll need to tell us project completion status. There are 4 options. Either you haven't started, you're less than 50% done, you're more than 50% done, or the project is completed. Don't expect that to change much month to month, obviously, but that is one of those elements that we have to report. You'll enter your current period obligations for the reporting period, and so this number needs to equal or exceed your amount of expenditures for that period. Unless you are, sorry, I should rephrase this. The amount of your obligations overall should always equal or exceed your expenditures overall. And in a given period, that may not be true if you've previously obligated funds and then you're spending down funds and you haven't obligated new funds, for example. You want to provide a brief description of what you've actually been up to during that prior month. As I said, if there's any new non-personnel obligations or expenditures, you'll need to tell us there, and then a reminder that you need to provide an attachment with some more information, which is what we just walked through. And then we have some conditional questions around capital expenditures and program income. We have a service metric. So this is, under this example, this is a revenue replacement project. So Department of Examples gets to select what its sort of primary service metric will be. In this case, they're primarily serving nonprofits, community-based organizations. So they'll select nonprofits and then provide the actual metric. So what's the number of nonprofits that they served? And then finally, you can enter any comments you want our grants managers or the reporting team to know about what you're reporting. And then there's a checkbox just to say that everything is in order. So that's a very quick rundown, and that was a lot very quickly, but hopefully helps demystify the process a little bit. We, as I said, will provide additional office hours to answer any questions over the next couple of weeks. I would ask that you try to direct your questions mostly toward these sessions, so we can record and make sure that the responses on those are available to everyone. If you have something that's really urgent, given the tight time frame, that is totally fine. I'd suggest you reach out to your grants manager, and then they can direct you to us. We'll also put the reporting team's contact info in the chat here, so you can get in touch as well. So that's the rundown I want to provide before we open up for questions, in anticipation of a lot of how-to questions to come up during the course of this. So we'll pause there. I see Jackie has a question already. Go ahead.
Hey, as y'all know, DOR actually reported back in March, so it looked like a lot of the spreadsheets is pretty much about the same as what I did then. It just wasn't through Pangram. Is that correct? Okay, good.
That's right. Yeah, we're the test.
So my question for the reporting period on the Excel document, since we're reporting for 3 periods, do we have to do one for each one? Do we have to do one for April, one for May, one for June, or how are we doing that since we're reporting for a 3-month period instead of a month period? How do you want to see that? Yeah,
that's a great question. With this initial report, it is fine if you just report under June. So in that selection, you can just in the spreadsheet just select June as the reporting period, and we'll know that because for us with reporting to Treasury, it wraps up into those quarters anyway, so that'll be sufficient for this initial period. And then just be sure that the expenditure dates that are in there are the important piece. So if you all are reporting for the first time on those expenditures incurred during that period, so that'll help us identify when money actually got obligated or spent. But totally fine to just use the June selection for the reporting month.
Okay, thank you.
Young Jin, did you want to add anything there?
That's good. Yeah, I think it.
Great. All right, Mr. Stover.
Yes, in looking at the reporting, I know there had been some discussion at least earlier in the year within our camp, and this may be true of the folks in with the library grants as well as the arts grants, about a tool or template that the subrecipients, in our cases, grantees, can report their expenditures in. That then will allow us to collate that information that then we can process and pass on to you. Is that still a discussion? Is that something we can say is forthcoming? It would help us to an extreme degree if that is something you can provide.
Yeah, and I think what I'd say there, which we've seen with other non-SFRF programs, is we can work with you all to adapt our reporting template to sort of meet the needs of your recipients, your subrecipients. So yeah, that we'll say that's forthcoming, but we can I think that can be a relatively quick one. And again, I think that the key there is that we can provide a template. You all may need to adapt it based on sort of the unique needs of your programs. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a challenge here is that there are a very wide range of uses of SFRF, but we can certainly provide you sort of the the nuts and bolts of information that we're required to get from you all to inform what would be in a template for you all to provide to your grantees.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah. Looking at the chat here, yes, we will circulate a copy of this presentation. We will also put it up on the website with the reporting information. Any reason we should or shouldn't use the Pangram record number? Young Jen, I'm going to. Sarah, is that specifically in for the subaward number? For the number on the subaward template. So let's pull up the.
Yeah, you were showing the number. It was like a 5-digit. You said it had to be between 3 and 10 digits. Is there not a reason we can't cross-reference to, like, because the first thing you're going to have to do is create the Pangram record to change your MOA and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, there would be, I don't know, I'm just thinking.
If it's a number that'll uniquely identify in an agreement that you all have with one of your recipients, one of your subrecipients, that's fine. But so it maybe Young Jen. I guess it depends on the nature of that number. If that number is associated with you all rather than your subrecipient, then that.
Well, actually, we decided instead of doing some extraneous number associated with a budget that doesn't live in our grants world, what we're doing is we are using the reference number that is either the number generated through the CRIS system or the Pangram number as the subcontract number. Otherwise, I got a 20 carry. I mean, I'm not going to start maintaining a separate number list for this. So
yeah, any number, any number that is less than 20 digits that you all already use or already plan to use to identify your subawards is satisfies this. That'd be fine.
Yeah, that's correct. If you can use the number matched one another in a Pangram, that would be great. If not, and you have the mechanism make the unique one-on-one match, so that will be easier to make the links. Sorry.
Sungjin. No, thank you. How do agencies report, or do they, if they have only spent the funds internally? So that would come up under, so I assume internally mean, so it depends on how you're spending money. So basically anytime the funds leave your agency's bank account, that would be considered an expense. If you are paying your staff, that would be reported. Let me actually put the presentation back up so I can show you the example here. Okay, so under this example, if you have personnel costs related to the grant, that would be reported just in the expense type reporting in Pangram. So that'd be a project level expense to report. And again, if it's personnel related, it only gets reported there. In Pangram, it does not get reported in the subaward attachment. However, any money that the agency spends outside of the agency on non-personnel goods or services would need to be reported as the example here is grant program execution, all other costs. So all other costs is in reference against personnel. So there's basically personnel costs and non-personnel costs. Non-personnel costs need to be reported as subawards. That does not mean that if you have a run to Staples for $300, you need to specifically identify Staples because that doesn't meet the $50,000 threshold. but you would want to record any cost that the agency has incurred as either personnel, admin related, personnel program related, programmatic costs that are non-personnel, and program and admin costs that are non-personnel would again the total numbers would get reported on the expense reporting page, but would require some additional aggregate reporting, most likely on the subward attachment. Okay, from Jane, just to clarify, we are not reporting the amount of SFRF that recipients have expended. Correct. So you are, what we need to know is how much money you have promised to another entity, and then how much you have actually paid out on that promise. So it's money leaving your accounts, not necessarily that the entity itself has gone and spent all that money. Now, you all may want to collect your recipient's expenditure information, and you should but that's not going to be information that NC Pro is going to need in the course of our regular reporting. How do agencies report zero expenditure? So if you all have zero obligations or zero expenditures for this initial report, you do not need to submit a report for that project in July. Starting in August, we will want to see ongoing reporting. So even if there's nothing to report, we want to see something come in so we know that y'all just didn't miss a report or forget about it. So that'll help us with our systems over here. If you have, for example, if you have obligated funds, but you haven't spent funds, you would just report to us the total obligations, but your expenditure information would be zeros across the board. So you don't have any expenditures to report. You don't need to provide any expenditure information. If you have committed funds to another entity, then if you've obligated those funds to a subgrantee or a contractor or vendor of some sort, then that would need to be reported. But again, overall, if there are no expenditures to report, you don't you just report it as zero. Let's see. Back to Jackie.
When you say obligated, what's your definition? And I ask because if we have an MOU in place with our subrecipient, but in the MOU, it says we'll make quarterly payments to them, right? So is it considered obligated because you have an MOU in place with them, the entire amount, or is it just the amount that you expect for that quarter?
Great question. So obligated would be the full value of that contract using SFRF, and then as you all make payments on that contract, you would just report those expenditures as we go, but that overall obligated amount wouldn't change. So you don't need to re-report the obligation in future periods. You would just go in and identify the subaward by the subaward number on the expenditures page. Again, I'll try to pull up the example here again if this is easier to show than describe. Well,
I think I understand that. I guess my question is, we just recently signed a MOU with our subrecipient. We only have one. We have a lot of beneficiaries, but only one true subrecipient here, and it's a whole separate MOU with NC Pro by itself. We just signed the MOU with them. I think it was like 6/28, 6/29. I mean, this week. Mm-hmm. So I was intentionally waiting until next week to even request any funds and give them any money, so that I wouldn't have to report on the 6/30 for that, since, I mean, obviously they're not going to have any expenditures, and we won't have any expenditures. But now, since we have the signed MOU in place before 6/30, would you expect me to report on that as the total amount of the MOU as an obligation?
Yes, so you'd report that as an obligation, and then in future periods, you'd report the expenditures on that obligation.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. What if we have SFRF funds and have not executed the MOA with them? Can you ask that again, Sarah? I'm not sure
I'm sorry.
follow.
Yeah, so we have been appropriated SFRF funds, but in a couple of cases or some limited cases, the MOU has not been executed yet. And I don't know if it will or not. If we find ourselves in that situation, I'm assuming we had no reporting obligations yet.
Correct. Do you mean the MOA with NC Pro?
Yes.
Yeah, that no reporting obligation then.
Andy, this is probably addressed somewhere in the reporting handbook, but I'm just want to make sure I'm clear. So on the subrecipients tab on the subaward spreadsheet, I know sometimes you all have used the term subrecipient to refer to all subawards, including beneficiaries. So I just want to make sure I'm clear whether this is just in fact referring to subrecipients from an audit determination perspective, or if it's all subawards over 50,000.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Jane. This has been an ongoing challenge. I think given how Treasury has structured this. So for the purposes of this reporting, a subrecipient on the subrecipient page is going to be any entity that is going to receive $50,000 or more from your agency, and Treasury at this point does not care whether that is a beneficiary, a contractor, or more of a traditional subgrant. So subrecipient is a very, very broad term for these purposes, understanding that there are normally subrecipients and contractors as those primary entities. But for this, subrecipient means everyone. If I understand correctly, we aren't reporting what the sub-award grantees expended the money on at this time. We'll eventually need to report that, some kind of tracking or documentation. So this is where things differ a little bit for us between what NC Pro needs to collect in order to meet our the state's reporting obligations to U.S. Treasury and the legislature. So at this time, we do not need information about how your recipients are spending their money. It's your agency's responsibility to monitor and track your recipient spending, your subrecipient spending, and then report to us what has come in and out of your accounts effectively. So some of this should be, and if Stephanie's still on, you may be able to speak to this better than me, but yeah. I believe some of this is addressed in the standard operating procedures as well.
It is. I would just caveat, Michelle, I think the question's a good one, and Andy said it as well, at this time. So last time we didn't think we were going to need to know the sub-award grantees expenditures. And then for CRF, Treasury came back and said that we need to know, we need to be able to trace everything down to know where they've expended until each dollar has been spent. So I do think it's a good idea to go ahead as part of your monitoring and track it, because we can't tell you definitively at some point. We're not going to need to know what your subawardees are doing. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of working with U.S. Treasury. They can change the rules on us at any time. And they have.
Yeah. Go ahead, Daryl.
Yes. Yeah, so, which does bring me back to that question I did state about needing the template. I think for us, we're supposed to track for a wide variety of reasons what the expenditures are, especially matching those expenditures up to measurable goals. And it appears to me that measurable goals are an important component of what we're supposed to be reporting relative to these expenditures. What have been the impacts? And to understand the impacts, we have to understand what the money was spent on. And so I say that to say, I'm unclear whether or not you are not having to report that, and therefore having us report that to you relative to the impacts. There was a column that you showed in your diagram. And so I say that to say that for us, we need that tool to specifically collect that sort of data in order to be able to stay on top of these expenditures. It's how we already handle them within the Science Museum grant program. But I wanted to just add that to the discussion. And I did just want to toss out, we generate a claim number for each of the payments that we make to our grantees. Is it likely that that claim number is, it sounds like it is, can be used for the subrecipient reporting document?
Yeah, if that number is associated with the subrecipient through the duration of their project rather than with individual requests for payments, if it stays with them, then yeah, that would be sufficient. Assuming again that it's a number and not alphanumeric.
Yeah, it's all numeric. It's a number, but it is tied to that request for payment that they've put in. We generate a request for payment that generates a claim number that sets the process for a payment going out. And so it is strictly tied to that payment and that entity. And I would think that that should be enough of an identifier and significant and specific enough to meet the purpose.
Does that number, would a single subrecipient end up with multiple claim numbers through the course of the project?
No.
Just the one? Then yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, well, let me just add this. Because of the way the budget laid out the monies, at least for our program, it was parsed 3.5 million one year, 3.5 million one year in that biennium. And so we would be generating a second claim number when we made that second payment as a result of distributing the money that way. So in that case, yes, there would be. So I don't know how to get around that, because that's how we do it. Not unless we're given the lump sum all of a sudden and distributing the total almost $7 million in one shot.
Yeah. So I guess my suggestion, so I think probably the best thing would be to have a subaward number that carries with that subrecipient throughout the duration of utilizing SFRF. Mm-hmm. If the first claim number is going to be, if that's how you all would internally identify that subrecipient, for our reporting purposes, would be sufficient to use that, as long as that it remains a subaward number that you all continue to report to us on that entity. The number you use to report to us on that entity, even after a second payment has been made.
So we can use it for dual purposes, and it meets your need.
It meets our needs, as long as it doesn't make things confused. If there's down the road, questions about an audit or anything like that, where U.S. Treasury comes down and wants to know more about a specific program, if we say yes, this program paid funds to these subrecipients using these numbers, and somehow the records based on the nature of the claim numbers muddies that. We could run into issues at that point, but strictly for our reporting purposes, if there is a number associated with that specific subaward that lives with that subaward for the duration of the period of performance, then that satisfies our needs.
Okay, I think I'm going to err on the side of not wanting to ruffle the feathers of any auditor, and what we will do is create a very clear number that sticks with the recipients for both of those payments, that does not then try to get double utility out of the claim number, because yeah, that, I don't know. Yeah, we won't ruffle any auditor's feathers.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it could, but there may be unintended consequences we just don't know right now with that.
Right.
So,
fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Vicky, how are you?
Hi, Andy. I'm good. So I've just been trying to wrap my head around the workload that's about to hit, because the North Carolina Arts Council, we probably have 300 grants that we're going to be giving with the money that we receive from this fund. And it's likely that there will be another 300 next fiscal year. And it's likely there are the same people. But anyway, it's going to be big. My question is about the sub-award reporting template. You showed us the first month, what it would look like to sort of build out the template. It seems to me that then we would start with that month and we would rename it in month 2, and we would then just update all of the information, because it's a cumulative document that we're sending to you month after month, right? Or an updated document we're sending of our entire activity for the months. Is that right?
Right. So the idea is that this will be a cumulative document. So you would add, for example, here as we go. So you're reporting to us in August about what happened in July. New subrecipient that's receiving over $50,000. And so on. So you'd identify them there on the, and you would report as you go. So it'd be a cumulative document. So, but hopefully, depending on your scheduled payments to those entities, I certainly understand I don't want to pretend like this is all super easy and not labor intensive. We know it is, and we really truly have tried to consolidate and simplify as much of this as possible. Certainly compared to what how we have to organize this information then to actually send to Treasury. So hopefully, unless you all are making payments every month to all 300 entities, then hopefully it's just like one tough few weeks, then you're good for a year. But I know that situation is different for everyone. Okay, back to revenue.
Hey, your answer just confused me.
Okay.
I was thinking we took this spreadsheet, because as you know, like for revenue, we've already done one for January through March. It included everything from January through March. And so I was thinking now we would do one obviously from April through June, but then that would be one document. We would start fresh. We would just put the new expenditures for that quarter on there. We wouldn't be adding it to what we already gave you. And I think that's what Vicky was asking. We would keep on adding to it. But how do we, on that first tab, if we're putting the reporting month, to me, it's like it's a separate document each time. And
right.
We're just in the expenditures for that month and not adding to it each time. So I was a little confused by your answer.
Yeah, good. Thanks for raising that. So let's say we're reporting in, it's not letting me change it right now. So let's say we're reporting July data then. So you would go ahead and change the reporting month on here, update the highlighted cells for anything that's changed. There might be someone different reporting, whatever the case is. If there are new subrecipients for that month that you have not previously told us about, you would tell us about it on the subrecipients tab and update it for the reporting month during which there's something new, some new activity to report. Same with the subawards. If you have a new subrecipient, I would assume that nearly every single time, if you have a new subrecipient, you're telling us about a new subaward. And so you'd enter the info here and then just the subaward information here. So this document will ultimately be cumulative, and so you would take what you reported to us the previous month, update, save a copy, update the reporting month on that front page, and then build on this information from there. Now, what I will say is, I know in particular revenue with the business recovery grant programs, you all have thousands of recipients, and so if we need to accommodate unique situations like that with the forms, we are flexible on that. We're trying to standardize obviously as much as possible, but if we do need to make an adjustment like that, then we can certainly have that conversation.
I was just going to add, Jackie, this is Stephanie. What happened last time with CRF is that we ended up having agencies have a gap when they submitted their subrecipients. So say they had subrecipients in March and they had subrecipients in April and they had subrecipients in May. Some of them didn't get reported between those 3 months. They thought they'd reported them in March, and so they didn't report them in April when they actually given them the money in April. So we ended up with all of these reporting sheets, and it took us hours, really more like weeks, to bring them all together to give them to the state auditor. So that's why when Andy's talking about changing that first sheet, but keeping all the subrecipient data all together in a cumulative manner, it's just so that we don't have that gap. So you too can go back and look and say, hey, we gave this money to this subrecipient. I think it was in March, so I'm not going to report it in April, when in reality, by having it all on the same sheet, that you have all your subrecipients covered. Again, revenue, y'all have so many subrecipients, we can work with you on that, but that's what we're trying to avoid, because I think we had to go back to state agencies multiple times, and to be completely candid, there are still parts of it that we are trying to clean up as we finalize our final Treasury reports before the end of this September for coronavirus relief funds. So we're just trying to make sure we don't have that situation where we're having to go back to y'all numerous times.
And that's fine. I don't mind reporting it cumulatively. That's not an issue. I mean, like you said, we do have thousands, but luckily, at least for right now, until we start giving out money for phase 2, we've March 31st was the majority of them for phase 1. I have very few I have to report between April and June. But I guess I just wanted to make sure, because even though my template that I completed in March, or I completed it in April for obviously period ending in March, it's very similar to this one, but it's not quite the same. So am I expected to go and copy all that data and put it over here? And I mean, how will I ever have a cumulative spreadsheet when what I reported in March was done in a totally, like I said, it's pretty consistent, because I've looked, it looks like the information is pretty much very consistent to what I did in March. It wasn't uploaded into Pangram back in March. I don't know if y'all did that on your side or not, but it was sent to you electronically, not through Pangram, because I don't think that was ready at that point. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do I make all of this work going forward with the least amount of work on myself. I'm not going to lie, because it's a lot, and we don't have a grants department here at the Department of Revenue. So it falls on just me. So,
Jackie, let us take a look out on our side and see if we can help you on that one. Y'all were our guinea pig, and we appreciate that. So if there's a way that our reporting team can help you, so you end up with a spreadsheet that looks like everybody else's, and you don't have to go back and do a lot of stuff, we'll work on that on our side. Okay.
That would be wonderful. And actually, the fact that you're talking about making it cumulative answers another question I had, because I did realize after I submitted this stuff back in April, and it was a very, very minor amount, so I didn't go back and correct it. But on the one I did, it was called the expenditures less than 50,000. There was a small amount that we had very little administrative costs back before March, because we were waiting for FAFATA information, so we wouldn't pay out any money until we got that. But there was some, and as you know, we have our BRG grants are separated for whatever reason into two different MOUs. We have the reimbursement, and which is called other with the MOU, and then the hospitality. And so for the grants, it's very easy, but from the administrative cost, at first I was going to split it 50-50. But really, the way the grant amount is on the MOUs, I only need to show the administrative cost on the hospitality grants. And I did show a little bit under the other. So I can just correct that in June, right? So that I don't show any of those costs there, because I'm worried about coming near the end. Right now, it doesn't matter. I mean, it was only $600 and something. It was very, very nominal amount. But at the end, when we do finish phase 2, if we spend all the money, it could show that we overspent on that grant when we really didn't. So I was wondering how that would work.
Yeah, let's follow up and work through some of that, because yeah, like Stephanie said, we really appreciate you all testing out these forms for us earlier this spring and all of that. And there are some changes, so probably be good for us to take a look at exactly what we have and identify what that change would be. What I'll say is on our end, we definitely want to make sure that we can go back and make updates or log corrections to things that need to be changed that were previously reported to us. U.S. Treasury does not have a plan at this point for having the ability to go back in and make changes to prior reports. So we're gonna have to figure out how to best track those kinds of things at a state level, and then sort of navigate whatever Treasury is thrown at us with that kind of process down the road, so that we are not telling, that we are properly tracking the funds here and making sure it doesn't look like you've overspent by $600, but we also don't want it to look to Treasury that the state as a whole, when all this is wrapped up, has overspent by $600. And we know that there are going to be those adjustments along the way in the course of normal business. So obviously want you all to be as accurate as possible, but there's a lot moving here. So we'll need to work with you all if there are items like that need to change. So specific to you all, let's definitely let's connect here in short order and talk through that, and then and revenue will be one of those the agencies where we need to talk about some information for us to include on the annual report we have to submit to Treasury as well, which we think will be pretty light in terms of info, but we'll need to connect on that. Okay. And I'm realizing we are now a full minute over time. I apologize for that. So just to quickly wrap up here, and I'm happy to stay on for a little bit, but want to give a nod to the time, and if folks need to hop off, that's fine with us. We have the office hours coming up next week and the following week. So if you all want to spend more time with these documents, and have other questions, feel free to please do and plan to attend those office hours as needed. We'll put Mikey, volunteering Mikey to put our contact info in the chat here as well, so we can hopefully answer questions, and as well, honestly, like the feedback on all this is incredibly helpful. We want to make sure this is easy, intuitive, and actually capturing information that is going to be useful. A lot of this is driven by what our sort of external requirements are, but ultimately this is a lot of information that is going to be meaningful for us to understand what's happening with this transformational money and what the impact has been at the end of the day. So appreciate all of your partnership and engagement on the fun topic of reporting, and hope to keep that conversation going. So Lee, I think we're good to wrap up unless folks have other questions to drop in the chat here.
Folks, thanks for your time as always, and great questions. Of course, we'll continue this as we go along. Everybody have a very good and restful holiday weekend, and we'll be back in touch with you soon. Be on the lookout. We'll send the information from today's meeting via email a little bit later today or tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good weekend.